From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiet. It's Monday, May 19, 2025. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of Pope Leo's inauguration mass in Rome on Sunday. The pair discussed the incarceration of Australian man Oscar Jenkins, who was sentenced to 13 years in a Russian prison after being caught fighting on the front lines for Ukraine. To net zero or not to net zero? That's the question looming over new Liberal Party leader Susan Ley. She's under pressure from some MPs not to support a 2050 emissions policy that they say demands a blank cheque. That exclusive story is live right now at theaustralian.com.au. Hackers have harvested potentially millions of dollars from unsuspecting taxpayers by breaking into their ATO accounts and submitting bogus tax returns. The Australian Taxation Office says its systems are safe from cyber threats, but The Australian's Paul Garvey believes there's evidence to suggest a breach like this has been a long time coming. When Kate Quinn's accountant logged in to complete her tax return at the end of the last financial year, she made a shocking discovery. Her tax account had been hacked, and her tax return was gone, paid out to a mystery bank account.
So they hacked in, they unticked notify me or notify my tax agent, changed the bank account details. He said it probably takes all of 10, 15 seconds and the money's gone and the case is closed and no one's notified. And then the bank account is closed. And I just thought, this is unbelievable that it's so easy.
And the thing is, Kate's predicament isn't unique.
I reckon it's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's happened to thousands.
The picture that's emerging is that hackers have been able to obtain the personal details of a whole lot of Australian taxpayers and their tax file numbers, and basically use that data to find their way into the MyGov system, and then they'll submit these fraudulent tax returns.
Paul Garvey is a senior reporter with The Australian.
It seems as though about $8,000 is the magic number that these hackers go after, and that it's large enough to make it worth their while, but not so large that triggers the automatic red flags within the ATO's own system. The other scary thing here is that these hacks, by and large, seem to be found almost by accident when individuals or their accountants go to lodge that year's tax return and find, hang on, this tax return's already been lodged. So that's when the alarm bells ring. And so it's really quite concerning that these things are happening at this sort of scale and seemingly off the radar.
The ATO uses multi-factor authentication to protect users' online accounts. That's where you plug in a unique code received via email or text message before you can log in. And voice prints to help identify us when we pick up the phone and call.
Thank you for calling the Australian Taxation Office Individual Info Line. We've introduced a highly secure and faster way to access your information. Your call will be recorded to improve our services and to create your unique voice print, which may be used to verify your identity.
But the multi-factor authentication wasn't triggered when Kate's account was compromised, and nobody seems to know how the hackers are getting around it.
These are the processes that they're annoying when we have to go through them in our day-to-day lives, but they're there for a very good reason, and that is to prevent this sort of thing happening. And it seems as though that system, for whatever reason, is just breaking down inside the ATO's processes here, that those two-factor authentications aren't triggering at the right times, aren't triggering for the right sort of matters, and really open the door to these kind of incidents. And it's something that's been identified previously in investigations into the ATO's online security systems. And if these cases of Kate and other people I've spoken to and other accounts that I've read are accurate, then there seems to be a lingering issue in the way these things are managed.
And so, Paul, what's the ATO doing to recover that money that's been fraudulently paid out to the hackers?
It would be great to get some more information from the ATO on this, because it would seem to me from the outside like it should be quite straightforward, right? This money's being sent to a bank account, and we have all these sorts of know your customer laws in Australia, all these money laundering laws in Australia where banks are supposed to be able to know just who is actually holding these bank accounts. Yet there's been no clear explanation to me that those requirements are actually being effective here in identifying who is actually receiving this money and are they getting it back from them. It's a big issue for the ATO clawing this back, and we would love to know how successful they're being, and if they're not being successful, what needs to change to get that money back, because it belongs to all of us. It's taxpayer money at the end of the day, and we need to get these monies back.
Over a series of phone calls, Kate Quinn, who works in the not-for-profit sector, was told she could face a long wait to see the situation resolved.
I was told I could be waiting up to a year while they investigate. And I said, no, this is not right. I pay my taxes. This is my money. And I said, I don't see why you can't honour this. And they said, yeah, it doesn't work like that. You'll be waiting quite a long time.
She kept on them.
So I gave it a few months and I called back just to annoy them, and they all said it's under investigation. Yours and a ton of others.
Kate did eventually receive her tax refund, but not everyone who was hacked has seen the same outcome.
Looking at the ATO's own community page where people can go up there and post questions for the ATO, you can see there's multiple people all saying the same sort of thing. And you can imagine the panic as well for individuals when they find this out, right? Because a lot of people are terrified that they will be obliged to pay back that fraudulent return themselves. There's the uncertainty that comes with that. And also for a lot of people, that tax return money can be a really important piece of financial relief, right? These are tough financial times, cost of living crisis. That couple of grand in your pocket on the back of a tax return can be the thing that really keeps a lot of families afloat. And so if there's fraud hanging over that account, can they actually go ahead and claim their legitimate entitlement? So it's a scary process, and it's not a quick process to resolve either. So that's a lot of sleepless nights for a lot of people when wanting to get this resolved.
So how many people are we talking here?
I did ask them that direct question, and the response they came back with didn't address that. I can see through other reports that there's certainly many instances, at least dozens, but interestingly, talking to people like Kate who have been through this process, when they're talking over the phone to ATO people, they can start to gauge from the conversations to how big an issue this is. And Kate's come away convinced that this is a matter for thousands of people. And when you think of the sheer number of taxpayers, you only need a tiny sliver of them to be compromised to get some pretty chunky numbers pretty fast. And in some cases, the hackers are actually putting in not just the most recent year's refund, but also prior years as well. So going back a second and a third time to make more and more claims, you're talking about $20,000 plus for each of these individuals. And that's money that I guess belongs to each and every one of us, right? It's paid out by the tax office incorrectly. We're all on the hook for that at the end of the day. So it really is a problem that really everyone should be concerned about.
Coming up, why this storm's been brewing for a while. When Kate Quinn flicked on the TV about a month ago, she caught the end of a news bulletin about a major hack.
And I thought, this is it. I knew this would happen, but it was people's super being hacked into.
Several Australian superannuation funds have been targeted by cyber criminals. It's caused panic and frustration for thousands of members who've been unable to check whether their nest egg has been impacted.
The question now is, how has a hack of the Australian Tax Office managed to fly under the radar for so long? Here's Paul Garvey.
Diving into this, I can see that this has been a brewing issue for the ATO for a long time now, well over a decade, that there's been that these weaknesses have emerged. So as tax become more and more in the online sphere, moving away from those old paper tax returns, if you're old enough to remember what they were like, each step of the way, there's been, I guess, holes in the system, holes in the Swiss cheese that have allowed these sort of things to happen at varying scale along the way. It's almost become perhaps part of the furniture of tax in Australia. The other thing is a lot of hacking incidents we hear about, there'll be the little old lady who's had her bank accounts cleaned out, the retiree who's watched their super fund disappear, these direct hip pocket hits, brutally cruel attacks on individuals that cripples them immediately and tangibly. Whereas this, we're talking about tax returns that people may have even forgotten to lodge themselves, didn't even know were there, or that they'd lodged previously and which have since been amended. The victim as such isn't being the one fleeced here directly, so it doesn't have that same kind of bite in that sense, if you follow what I'm saying. And look, you could also probably draw a line to think that maybe there's an element of self-preservation here from the ATO. I mean, it looks like, talking to people like Kate and to accountants out there, that the ATO probably hasn't covered itself in glory in ensuring that its systems are as robust as we might expect from an agency as well-respected and well-resourced as the ATO. They may not be exactly ecstatic to be putting up in lights that some shortcomings in their system may have at best contributed to these outcomes here. So there's a few reasons, I think, why it hasn't necessarily blown up as large as it perhaps deserves to be.
Labor, of course, went to the election promising instant tax refunds of up to $1,000 for eligible Australians. That's not due to come into effect until the middle of 2027 at the end of the 26-27 financial year. But does a breach of this magnitude have implications for that plan?
It most definitely should, because one thing that we've seen consistently over the years is that for every step taken in terms of security or in every initiative taken by a state or federal government in trying to provide some form of tax relief, there are a whole bunch of hackers who are pouncing on that and trying to stay a few steps ahead of where regulators, lawmakers are in dealing with this sort of thing. So I would have thought that this very clearly should remind the federal government of what can happen, of the needs for these sorts of precautions, and to be constantly thinking, where are the vulnerabilities? How do we prevent this from being illegally exploited? Like we've said, this has been going on in some shape or form for many years now. It's certainly not a problem that's specific to one side of government over another, but it most certainly will undermine that public confidence that we have in this. So that's certainly something for the ATO itself and also for lawmakers to firmly keep in mind.
Paul Garvey is a senior reporter with The Australian. The Australian Tax Office told Paul its systems are secure, resilient and have not been compromised. You can read his report right now at theaustralian.com.au.